Hi, everybody. This is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Per Sjofors, also known as the Price Whisperer. He's a thought leader and author in everything pricing and how companies can use pricing to drive higher growth, sales volume, and profits. He's a sought-after speaker, appears regularly on podcasts and business radio shows, and gets routinely quoted in the financial and business press. I'm excited to have him with us today because as entrepreneurs, obviously, we all want to be able to grow our sales, grow our profits. And so if there are any tips and tricks on how to do that, we're always excited. So he's going to help us learn exactly how to do that. So with that, welcome, Per, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Brett. And I hope you and I hope the audience will find this interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, I was fascinated when I was looking through your background myself, just because in my experience, and I'll share some of it as we go, my experience with pricing and the way that people generally determine prices is probably far less, analytical or based on anything that's strategic, and far more as an easy lever to pull to try to get more sales.
Yeah.
So I know you're going to be able to share with us how to grow our sales and profits through pricing, but let me just start by asking you about your background. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us, how did you get your start and what made you focus on pricing strategies specifically?
So I ran a couple of companies in Europe before I came here to the US, and I came here to establish and run a division of a fairly large public company. And after that, I had 4 more CEO jobs, and we did experiments with pricing in those instances, and some of those experiments were very, very successful, meaning that next quarter revenues are up 25% or so. Others were complete duds, and what I had learned in business school about pricing was so academic and so theoretical that it didn't help us in any way to understand why some of those experiments worked. And when it was time for me to set out on my own, not being a hired gun anymore, I decided to take that interest in pricing that I've had and develop a process to make every pricing experiment a success, and then also develop a business around it, right? So that's the background. And unbeknownst to a lot of entrepreneurs, everything you do in a company affects how you can price, right? Okay. So what I'm talking about and why pricing, if done right, always works, is that one have to have this holistic view and understanding that everything you do in your company affects pricing, right? Or how you can price, I should say. And that is what we teach.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's really interesting, and it's a fascinating take on it, because I think for most people, at least in my experience, what their idea of pricing is I have a product or a service I'm going to offer the market. I'm going to look and see what I can charge for it. And it's sort of more market driven in terms of they price it based on what they think will sell. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how many companies or entrepreneurs look at it from a different perspective and sort of see that strategically. So I'm curious, when you look at companies, pricing strategies, so obviously you've done this yourself internally at companies, and as a consultant for other companies as well. What are the biggest mistakes that you see people making with regard to pricing?
Well, I'm going to get to that. Let me just give you 2 stories on how not to do it. Right?
We like stories. Absolutely.
And the first story is a company that they're a SaaS company, and they have contract management. That's what they do. Okay. And I had conversations with them maybe 10 years ago, long time ago. And the CEO told me that I decided that our price should be $165 per user per month, right? And then he continued, but I don't know if that's right. Maybe it should have been 99. Maybe it should have been 250. But $165 a month just felt right, right? Now, I just out of curiosity, I looked up the company's website a couple of weeks ago, and it is the same website as it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
So I assume they haven't grown as quickly or as much as they had planned to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The other example is a company that I met at a trade show. They actually do something quite interesting. They have a little holder for your license plate, right?
Okay.
And in that holder, there's a little camera. So if you have an older car without a backup camera, you will get it to your phone on the that you may. Well, older car, you probably also don't have a navigation system and stuff like that. So you use your phone.
So you get your own phone with a backup camera. That's
So
a cool idea.
It's I think a good product, right?
Yeah.
And the CEO told me, no, Per, my gut feel is better than your science.
That's the curse of an entrepreneur. I mean, we think we know everything, right? Go by gut. And, who cares about statistics? Who cares about analytics and stuff like that?
That is another interesting thing. If we talk about entrepreneurs and capital providers and so forth, I had a conversation with a famed venture capitalist also a couple of years ago, and he said this. He said, the management team that we put into the companies believe they are there because they know, but that's not the case. They are there because they know how to find out.
Right.
Interesting definition, eh?
It is. It's a subtle distinction, but it obviously has a very different meaning. And,
Right.
You can see the value in that. So would you say that the mistakes that people make is going without any data?
Yeah,
and it's more based on...
if you look at the biggest mistake overall is not knowing how important pricing is for your business, right?
Yeah.
The second is to use some kind of gut feel. Sometimes companies say we price to market. What does that mean? They don't know what their competitors are pricing. They don't know what discounts and deals and bundles and stuff like that. Only their customers know, and they are unlikely to tell the company, right? So price to market is the same as gut feel, all right? And even if your competitors has pricing online, right? Again, it's unlikely that you will be able to know again what bundles and what specials they may do. If it's and you don't know whether the company has geotagging, so it depends on where you are. You may see different prices. You don't know if you
Right.
go back to the same website, is the pricing going to change? So it's that's a imprecise way of doing it. And of course, if your company, so that leads to the next mistake, which is to price as competition, right? Because that is often, you start by pricing as competition, and then that means that you care too much about your competition and not enough about your customers. If you price the competition, that's often the first step, because then suddenly you start to market as the competition, and your products or your service is going to be like competition. And now you're in the commoditization death spiral. which is
I was just thinking that as you were
Yeah.
saying it. I'm like, you're commoditizing yourself
Yeah.
by doing that because you're letting them compare themselves to you and saying, oh, yeah, we're all the same.
yeah, exactly, yeah. A very common way of pricing is cost plus, right?
Okay.
So, and different industries have different sort of rules of thumb for cost plus. And cost plus is calculate your cost and then slap on a margin, right? And that of course have nothing to do with the value that your customer get from the product or your service, right?
Yeah.
And the different, like I said, different industries have different sort of rules of thumb, you know.
Percentages or, yeah.
And
yeah.
I've personally been involved in industries, high-tech industries, where you're talking about a 15% margin over cost. I've also been involved in high-end audio, where it's like 10 times your cost to get to the price.
Wow.
And retailers typically double the cost, right,
Okay.
to get
You're
to
right.
price. It's all of these methods, and there are more of them, but these are the most important ones, are guaranteed to leave money on the table for no reason,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They do have one benefit though, right? And that benefit is that they're very easy. They don't take any
Yeah.
resource. It's easy for the
Exactly.
company to understand, and it's also very costly for the company, right?
Right. Exactly. You know, I remember when Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream company, was launching, and the price point on their ice cream was so high, people said, "You're insane. Nobody is ever going to buy this ice cream. They're paying half that." And you know, Ben and Jerry's said, "Well, you know, we're going to use all the best ingredients. We're going to build this brand and build value for customers. So, for the ones who really want the best, they're going to do that." And they went to sort of the upper flank. And now, you know, after they did it and people saw, hey, wait, that worked, then other companies tried to jump in and started to uptick their prices as well. And, you know, it's definitely interesting if you have the right relationship with your customers. You know, I've been in the software industry for a long time. So I know that for me, one common idea that I see is when there are vendors or my partners or whatever, and they want to increase sales, if they feel like sales are a little soft, generally, as I mentioned at the onset, the lever they pull is price.
Yep.
They lower the price, and they figure, okay, if I lower the price, I'll get more people into the funnel. And so I guess, you know, I'm assuming the answer to that is that's not really a good idea.
Price is the most powerful is the most powerful marketing message of quality, just like in the Ben and Jerry's case, right? And if you want to make sure that you're not a commodity, one way of differentiate yourself is with price, right? And you want to make sure that your product fits, your product to market fit is correct. You want to make sure that you focus your marketing and your outreach on a customer segment, or call them customer avatars or customer personas.
Okay.
It's all the same. That supports those higher prices that you have and are particularly intrigued by your differentiators in your product or your service, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And the it's sort of you know, when you hear I've talked to a lot of CEOs, right, and when you hear things like oh, we focus on everybody, that is no focus.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I mean, it's the same thing as saying, yeah, you don't focus on anybody. I mean, the analogy I always draw when I'm talking to other entrepreneurs about, you know, sort of trying to figure out what what your niche is or what your target market is, you know, if you created some sort of a guide for dog training, and it was, dog training tips, you're going to lose your market share to all the Dalmatian owners for the person that made it the Dalmatian training tips.
Yeah.
Because it's more specific, it's more targeted for their specific breed of dog.
Yeah.
And so by trying to do everything, a little bit to everything for everybody, you lose out on all the specialists and the people that are targeting specific groups in every single area. By the time you're done, you don't have much left in terms of a market to even fight for. So the irony is, the more general you are, and the more people you try to appeal to, the fewer you ultimately do, which is kind of funny. But so based on your experience, why do you think the companies make those pricing mistakes? Is it just that's the way they were always taught to do it? Is it that they think that their gut feel is good enough, or that just looking at competitors' prices are really the best way to do it?
When I speak to people, they generally always say that pricing is really important, right? But
Okay.
what I think there's two reasons for why they say it's important and then don't do the right thing, and one is, business school. You go 3 years in business school and they talk about pricing after lunch on one Wednesday, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the second is that companies do not understand the leverage point of pricing, right? And
Okay.
I sometimes do something in my presentations and so forth that I call the 1% challenge, right?
Okay.
And if you look at any company, has the resulting profits comes from only 3 variables, right?
Okay.
It is the total cost of the operation. It is the sales volume of whatever the company is selling, and it's
Okay.
the price of whatever you're
Makes
selling,
sense.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And companies spend a lot of resource trying to increase their sales volume. They spend a lot of resource on trying to keep costs down, right?
Yes.
And and then they do gut feel, 15 seconds for that price, right? But if we do that, do a thought experiment, and change these 3 variables 1%, right?
Okay.
So if for the average company, if you can increase your sales volume with 1%, profit goes up with 3.5%. If you can reduce your cost with 1%, profit goes up with 5.5%.
Okay.
And if you can increase your price or reduce your discount with 1%, because that's the same thing, right?
Right.
Profit goes up with 11.3%.
Wow.
Right?
So it's actually the most powerful of the
That's
3
right.
factors.
That's right.
And yet it gets the least amount of attention.
That's right. and now, having said that, as we've all seen, during the couple of years we lived under fairly high inflation, there is a lot of companies who blame the inflation for increasing prices a lot more than just covering the effect of inflation. And so there's, in general terms, there are more profits out there now than there used to be, right?
Right.
But it's the particular 1% challenge that I'm saying is, have you ever failed to change anything 1%? Right?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it, and I mean, if you start looking at prices in that particular light, right? On the leverage, you're going to start maybe you say to your salespeople that, sorry guys, you can now only discount 10% and not 20% as you were used to, right?
Okay.
And they're gonna rebel. They're gonna say we can't sell, right, unless we can discount that much, right, and so forth. But then train them on how to deliver the value proposition. Train them on how to defend prices, right, and suddenly you have doubled your profits, right? Now, what are you going to do with those profits? Well, you are going to put them back in the company, right? You may develop more products. You're certainly going to use it for more market development.
Right.
You may even hire better people because they are going to be more expensive. Right?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because pre-dot-com bubble bursting, late 1990s, I was actually working at an IT consulting company. And my role was, I was a director of professional services. So one of the things that I had to do was I had to do the performance evaluations for all of our field consultants. And I did, raises and things like that. Well, the salespeople didn't like it if I gave out raises because it meant what they had to charge went up to the client. Yeah. So we had this one particular consultant who was really good at what he was doing. And it was a time when everyone was throwing stock options around. So it was hard to keep people in the company to begin with if they were very good. This guy was really good, but he also was pretty loyal to the company. So I did his performance review. I gave him a raise. And when I got back to the office, the branch manager came to me and he was flipping out on me. I can't believe you gave him this raise. Like, now I got to charge all this money. So I said, look, you got to just chill out. The fact of the matter is this guy's worth it. So he's either going to get it here or he's going to go somewhere else to get it.
Yep.
And about a week goes by, and he comes out of his office and he says, hey, big smile on his face. He goes, I got to tell you, he's worth it. He goes, I called the client and I told them, well, we had to give him a raise to keep him. And, so I got to charge you this. They were like, okay.
Yeah.
Because they saw the value that he was providing, but in the sales guy's head, all he saw was, I got to negotiate this new price with them, and they're going to push back because it's higher.
Yeah.
When in reality, the value is there, so there was no pushback anyway.
You're bringing up something interesting because the companies get, and particularly salespeople, get grind down, right? Because what they often hear, not in this particular case, but what they often hear from customers is that you're not as good as competition and you're too expensive, right?
Yes.
And this is just negotiating tactics.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with reality. I mean, think about this. Say you're on the car dealer lot and they have the car you want. They have it in the color that you want and everything like that. And you really value the car. You value the color and other features it may have. Will you say to the salesman, "Oh, if you have it in my preferred color, I'll pay you another $1,000"? No, you don't. You say, if you have it in my preferred color and take another $2,000 off the price, I'll buy it. Right?
Right. That's right.
That's human behavior.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
And so I mean, there's a phrase here, saying buyer liar, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that every customer lies, but it certainly means that just about everybody will withhold information that they think will be valuable for the company they negotiate with, if sort of next time they buy from them, right? And that means that companies get a gut feel of call that market price. That is wrong, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes total sense. So obviously one of the benefits of charging more, raising our prices, is the fact that we can make more profit, right? That's simple math.
Yep.
But is that the main benefit or only benefit, or are there other benefits too to actually raising our prices?
Yeah, but we need to look at profit in the light that companies buyers, right? And this could be consumers or it could be B2B, buy from a company because they provide some value, right? If that buyer don't think there's going to be value, they're going to go somewhere else. They're not going to buy. So higher profits for a company means that they have the opportunity to deliver more value to more potential buyers, right? And
Right.
it therefore becomes a how should I say, more profit means more value. In the end, more profits means more value to the actual buyers at a higher
Sure.
price, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can't deliver value to your customers, you don't have a business, right?
Yeah. No, that's obviously true. So, so some entrepreneurs and business owners out there might be thinking, okay, the pricing strategy stuff sounds good. I get the idea, and I might want to do this, but we don't really have a lot of sales data, or we're a new company that's just deciding what our pricing is going to be for our products or services. Does this require a lot of data to be able to analyze pricing, or can we do it even if we're brand new?
Well, the method that I developed based on the experience we talked about early on here requires no sales data at all, right?
Okay.
And and here's another interesting thing, because there is a lot of companies, if they actually spend some resource on pricing, it is typically just sales data they look at.
Okay.
But there's 2 points here. And let me start with the first one, which is that companies obviously should be close to their customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when they try to understand their market, they need to actually go out to the market, not to customers. And
Okay.
think about it in this way, and I'm going to give you an example. This company, they do small batches of drugs that are used in clinical trials, right?
Okay.
You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do truckloads of the pills, and it's a U.S. company, but they're metric. So they came to us and said, the market wants batches of 2,000 liters, right?
Okay.
And everything else is just peanuts. The market is totally centered around batches of 2,000 liters. So we only do 2,000 liters, right?
Okay.
What the research we did, and that's obviously part of our process, we found that there were less than a quarter of the market who preferred 2,000 liters. And so here's what happened. They went out to the market with marketing talking about the benefits of 2,000 liters, right? Now, the people who wanted to buy 2,000 liters became their customers, right?
Right.
And then they asked the customers, what is the best batch size? And they said 2,000 liters. So they operated in an echo chamber, right?
Right. Right.
And
That's awesome.
And so that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider, and that's when you do data analysis of the sales data, is that it looks at prices as would it live in a vacuum, right?
Okay. Right.
And like I said, everything you do in a company affects how you can price.
Mm-hmm.
And let me then give you an example of that. And this is a company that has these they have these dispensers for filtered waters. That typically lives outside the grocery stores and places like that.
Okay.
People go there with a 5-gallon jug and they fill it up and bring home. They came to us and said, we tried to increase our prices 7 years ago and it backfired badly, so we had to go back, right?
Right.
But the research, and we haven't talked about the research we do in my company, but the research we do is to understand how that everything you do in the company affects how you can price.
Okay.
And so we found that if the company would position themselves differently, there were plenty of room to increase prices. So what they did, and marketing in this case for these companies that have these dispensers, is essentially the message is on the dispenser itself, right?
Okay. Right.
And we found that a new positioning statement and so forth would allow them to increase prices. So over about a week, they changed their messaging and they increased their price. And so in 1 week, they went from a $200 million company to $240 million company.
That's amazing.
You know?
Absolutely amazing.
Because a different set of messaging was better in conveying the value of their product.
And I suppose in these cases too, generally as a business owner, right, we think we want to huddle around our customers and keep them. But in some cases, it's probably what ends up happening, I would imagine, is we might even lose some of our older customers and gain a larger share of new ones that are actually more profitable.
Yep.
Because if they're the ones who are the bargain hunters, or they're the ones who are buying from us because of price or because of, we might lose them, but if we gain more than what we lose, it's again simple math, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're now going to make more because we're charging more and we're getting more customers.
I mean, so we worked with a company that has they have a business phone system in the cloud, right?
Okay.
And startup, or no, not really startup, but they were early stage anyway.
Okay.
And they were so underpriced that we said that you can quadruple your prices, right? And which they did, not overnight, but they sort of inched them up over 9 months or something like that.
Okay.
And when I followed up with the CEO, he told me that there was two things happen after increasing prices or quadrupling prices. One was that their sales volume went up with 25%, right?
Wow.
The other was, and I'm paraphrasing him here, he said, and we got rid of the bottom feeders. And now we have a more professional level customers, so our customer support costs have gone down with 80%.
Yeah. That's something I think a lot of people overlook or don't consider. But I actually had, when I first graduated from college, I actually started a custom configured PC business. Mm-hmm. And it was pre-internet. So we were advertising in the back of magazines. We were shipping PCs all over the country. So I had a small staff and everything. And I learned that lesson really, really early on, because the customers that would call up that had tremendous amounts of demands, we were a very small company. We couldn't do what, maybe Dell or HP or some of these other guys could do. But at the same time, we were more personalized. Mm-hmm. And so, these people would call up and they'd have these crazy demands. And what I found was there was almost a one-to-one correlation, not only between the amount of customer support they needed, but in our refund requests and everything else, because ultimately, after they asked us to jump through 28 hoops, then they still weren't pleased anyway and wanted their money back. Yep. And so we ended up at that point, stopped doing business with anybody. If you could buy what we had to offer, and we had a little bit of wiggle room here and there, and if it was outside of that, we aren't equipped, you're a more discerning customer. One guy actually said to me on the phone, are you telling me I'm a pain in the butt? I said, no. I said, I'm telling you that we're a small company. You have very discerning tastes, and we aren't equipped to be able to handle somebody with tastes like you have. Yeah. So you're better off to go. And so, well, that's better. I mean, it's literally what he said. I mean, it was like some kind of psychological experiment, but I mean, it was like magic with the way that worked. He went away. He was ultimately happy because, we told him he's too important for us. And at the same time, we learned a really good lesson. So, yep. I think that's really important. Yep. So we're excited about the pricing idea, obviously. Can you give us some pricing tips that we could use and apply in our businesses?
Yeah, the how you present prices is very important. And one of the most effective ways of increasing sales volume at the same time as you increase prices is to use something called price imaging or price anchoring. And what that means is that when your customer looks at your price list, whether that happened to be whether it happened to be on the website, in a proposal. If you're a restaurant owner, it may be in the menu, because that's a price list, right? The first thing that you want to make sure that they see is a very high price for something. Doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's a high price. And the price is going to be so high that very few people are ever going to buy it, right? But that, as humans, we cannot not compare, right? So when we then see the prices of what you actually want to sell, they're going to appear more affordable, right? And if you go to MailChimp, right, you will see that they have an offering for $299 a month, right? The next level down is $14.95.
Okay.
Right? So
they don't have a lot of customers at $300 a month.
No, exactly. And that also tells you that you should always present a good, better, best strategy. That should be in a best, better, good version. So you should always start with the more expensive offer, right? Because that is going to make the other two choices more affordable. The most brilliant example I've seen of this is when Apple came out with a watch, and it was $349, right? But there was a version for $17,000. And
right. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. And of course, every journalist who wrote about this talked about the audacity of Apple to sell the same electronics for $349 or $17,000. And of course, the difference was that the more expensive version here had a case made out of gold, right?
Yes.
But the point I'm trying to make is that potential buyers of the watch, long before it was actually available, was exposed to the $17,349, and that $349 became more and more and more affordable, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's that's important. And the other thing that one should do is, if it's appropriate, and that is pricing on the 9, right?
Okay.
So it's not going to be $10. It's going to be $9.95 or $9.97, right?
Right.
But there are exceptions, right?
Okay.
If what you're selling is supposed to be unique, is supposed to have, stand out, if you like, right? You should not do this, right?
Okay.
But if what you're selling is a commodity or a near commodity, you should. Like in this Apple case, it was $17,000. It wasn't $1,699 or $16,999, right? Because you want to use this to convey value, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is that 97 is a little bit more effective than 99 to drive higher sales, right?
Okay.
It gives on the average about a 3% higher sales volume. And I get mad, when I see somebody selling something at $1,003, right?
Right. Yeah. Just over instead of under.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And this has to do with the way we read, right? So the first digit in a price sits in our head, right? So the difference between $29.95 and $30 is, what we read this is 20-something versus 30-something, right?
Exactly.
Now, does everybody read like that? No, of course not. But enough people do so that it's worthwhile making that change, right?
It makes a difference. Yeah. Yeah.
In fact,
No,
there is research saying that if you go from the 30 to the 29.95, you may see up to a 20% increase in sales volume.
wow. 5 cents. Yeah, it's crazy, but I mean, that psychology definitely works. So I know. So we can go to your website, Sjofors.com. It's SJOFORS.com.
Yes.
And I know that there's a bunch of free resources there, like the 7 Easy Steps to Successfully Increase Prices Guide, the Top 10 Mistakes in Pricing Research Guide, how to implement a new service or product pricing strategy. All those are basically free guides and downloads. We can also find your book there, your courses, and all the other ways that we can work with you to grow our business as well.
Because I got such a wacky name, the best way of finding me, and this is also my book, right?
Excellent.
Is to Google the Price Whisperer. You should get about 10 million hits.
Wow.
And most of them are me. So.
All right, so that's the easy way to do that.
Yeah, and Price Whisperer is a little easier. You also get the website by doing that.
Right, and it's easy to remember in any language, I guess, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
So are there certain requirements, or do you think every company can improve their pricing? Are there certain things that a company needs to have in order to be able to do this?
A willingness to change. That is the most important, right? If you think that everything you do in the company is absolutely spot on and there's nothing that can be done better, then there's no point, right?
Right.
The company need to be willing to change, right? And what, if we go to my book, the subtitle is more important, a holistic approach to pricing power. And
Makes
that's
sense.
that I've said a couple of times now, that everything in a company and anything what a company does affects how you can price. So if you're not willing to change your marketing, if it shows up that needs to change, then there's no point, right?
Right.
So
yeah. So as long as you got that willingness and adaptability.
Yep.
And so the last question that I always ask, and I have to ask this, is what is your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Never give up.
It's great advice, and actually I've heard so many people that have been in the entrepreneurial ranks and been around businesses for any period of time. That tends to be a theme that comes up over and over and over again, because it's not always that the first thing we try works.
No.
It would be nice if it worked that way, but oftentimes it's messy, it's sloppy, and you gotta sort of slog through it to get to where you're going. So yeah, it's great advice. With that, it's just about...
Yeah, let me tell you another little anecdote about that.
Absolutely.
I got to know a couple of French entrepreneurs that they had moved there, a high-tech company. They had moved from France to Silicon Valley somewhere, and because that would give them more success, right?
Sure. Right.
That was the perception, right?
Right.
So they set up shop in the valley somewhere, and after a year they moved back to France, and they said, "But we had to work." They thought that it sort of just comes automatically, right?
Yeah, you're going to show up there and people are throwing money out.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you go to the hotbed of where stuff is, it's actually more competitive anyway, because now you're being compared against everybody, as opposed to having your own niche and your own thing carved out. So, that's a perfect anecdote for that.
So.
All right, so with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. Thank you again, Per, for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Go to Sjofors.com, SJOFORS.com, or Google The Price Whisperer to download some great free resources, get his book and his course, and learn more about his services. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optYOUmize.
Thank you so much, Brett, and thanks to the audience. I hope you enjoyed this.